Welcome to Mueller's Basic Field Diagram tutorial. This video teaches the proper approach to creating a field diagram by using a basic home as an example. However, the skills you learn from this video will be applied when drawing a diagram for any structure. Each component of a home must be drawn with its own individual ground floor shape, known as the footprint. The footprint can be determined by visualizing the home as it would look if viewed from above. The individual footprint shapes of the components can be thought of as pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. These puzzle pieces fit together in a specific way to show the entire home's footprint. Just like a jigsaw puzzle, the components cannot overlap or be placed on top of each other. To draw a field diagram for this home, you first have to identify its individual diagram components. From this view, you can see the main portion of the home is 1.5 stories, and the area where the front door is located is only 1 story. To start, stand at a position where you can see the front and one side of the house. You have identified the main portion of the living area as 1.5 stories. Start to draw the footprint of that portion of the home first. The right side wall will be represented by a straight line drawn vertically on the field diagram. Next, you should draw the front of the 1.5 story component. Imagine the 1 story section on the front of the home doesn't exist and focus only on the main component. Without the 1 story section, the front wall of the main living area is a straight line drawn horizontally on the field diagram. For this home, the front wall is longer than the right side wall. Give your field diagram a proportion by drawing the line for the front wall longer than the line you drew to represent the right side wall. Now that you have the main living area started, you can address the 1 story component. The footprint of the 1 story section on the front of the house is the shape of a rectangle and appears to be centered on the front wall of the main living area. This component needs to be drawn in the appropriate position and in proportion to what you have already drawn for the main living area. The next step is to label the components that you have started to draw. Living area components must be labeled with the number of stories and foundation type. For this example, we can see basement windows on the right side indicating a basement foundation for the main living area. You can't see the foundation type of the front 1 story section and will need to get a closer look while measuring. Using your measuring wheel, begin measuring at the point that you began drawing the diagram. For this example, measure the right side by starting at the rear corner working towards the front of the house. Line the head of the wheel up with the corner of the home from which you are starting. Roll the wheel along the ground until the head is lined up with the corner to which you are measuring. Remember to always round all of your measurements up or down to the nearest foot. Now that you have the measurements for the right side of the main living area, write it next to the line you have drawn on the field diagram. It is important to record the measurements you take by writing them down in the appropriate place on the field diagram. Be sure to reset your wheel before you begin each measurement. Each section of the diagram needs its own individual measurements. The front of the 1.5 story component is a long straight line that needs only 1 measurement. To save a little time, you can measure the 1 story component along the way. To do this, start by measuring from the front right corner of the main living area to the right side wall of the 1 story section. Write this number down next to the line on the diagram that represents this wall. Next, you should measure the right side wall of the 1 story section followed by the front wall of the 1 story section. Write each measurement next to the corresponding line on your diagram. Remember, you needed a closer look at this component to determine the foundation type. You can't see a basement window or crawl space vent, but the front door is positioned well above ground level, which generally excludes a slab foundation. You must make an estimate of the foundation type for this component. The front 1 story section appears to have been built at the same time as the main home. It would be reasonable to estimate that the 1 story section also has a basement foundation. Now that you have made this estimate, go ahead and write it on the field diagram. Continue your diagram by measuring from the left side wall of the 1 story section to the front left corner of the main living area. Sometimes you'll have to work around landscaping or other obstacles by taking your measurements a little further away from the home. Be sure to write the measurements on your diagram. The next step will be to view and draw the left side of the home. In the same way you address the front of the home, first imagine this 1 story section doesn't exist. The left side of the main living area is again a straight wall. Continuing from the front left corner, draw a vertical line on your field diagram to represent the left side of the 1.5 story portion of the home. You can see the front and left side of the 1 story section. Draw this section in its appropriate position on the left side of your diagram. Since you can't see the back of the home, don't draw the rear of the diagram yet. Be sure to label this component with the number of stories and foundation type. In this case, you would estimate basement for the same reasons you estimated basement for the 1 story section on the front of the home. Now that you have drawn the left side of the diagram, begin measuring. Start at the front left corner of the main living area and measure to the front wall of the 1 story section. Write the measurement down in the appropriate position on the diagram. Next, Measure and record the dimensions of the front and then the left side of this one-story component. Now that you can see the back of the house, you know what the unfinished portion of the footprint should be. In this example, the back of the home is a long, straight wall. A small portion of this wall is the rear of the one-story section. The remainder is the rear of the 1.5-story section. Looking up at the roof line, you can see where the two sections meet. When the home is viewed from the rear, what you see in your right is actually the rear left corner of the house. On your field sketch, starting from the rear left corner, draw a line connecting the rear left and rear right corners of your diagram. This will complete the drawing of these two components, which you can now see are both rectangular in shape. Begin measuring at the rear left corner of the one-story section, but only measure to the point where the 1-story and 1.5-story sections meet. Again, by looking up at the roof line, you can see where this measurement should stop. Write that measurement on the diagram at the rear of the one-story section. The last measurement you need will start at the point where the 1 and 1.5-story meet and continue to the right rear corner of the main living area. Write this measurement on the diagram at the rear of the 1.5-story section. That completes the diagramming and measuring of this home, but you are not quite done yet. You need to check your work before you leave the property. We refer to this as balancing the diagram. Your completed diagram must be balanced, meaning the opposite sides will have the same total measurements. Front measurements must be equal to the rear measurements, and the right side must be equal to the left. Remember that you measure the front and the left side of the home in segments. Notice the 11-foot measurements on the front of the home were written on the outside of the diagram. The same was done with the 14-foot measurements on the left side. These measurements are used to help obtain the total measurements for the 1.5-story component. Now simply add up the total right to left measurements taken on the front of the home to gain the total front measurements of the 1.5-story component. 11 plus 8 plus 11 equals 30 feet. Write the number 30 on the inside of the 1.5-story section. Notice this balances with the 30-foot measurement taken across the back of the 1.5-story portion of the home. Using the same approach on the left side of the home, add the two front to back measurements to determine the total measurements of the left side of the 1.5-story component. 14 plus 10 equals 24. Write 24 on the inside of the 1.5-story component. Notice this balances with the right side measurement of 24. The other two components are smaller rectangles and both have the appropriate length and width measurements in place. Congratulations, you have successfully drawn, measured, and balanced your diagram. Using these shapes, labels, and measurements when recreating this diagram on Mueller's website, you will meet your goal of obtaining the square footage of each of the diagram's components. This concludes the basic field diagram video. Thank you for your attention.